What's up, everybody? It's JT Sports back to you guys with another video. And I'm here with the Miami Dolphins versus the Atlanta Falcons. Week 1 NFL preseason preview. Want to be breaking down this game, give you guys some things to watch and some players to watch for this game. Now, before I begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Upload NFL videos and NFL content daily. So let's get into it. So some things to watch for this game. I obviously want to watch the Atlanta Falcons offensive line because in the Hall of Fame game, their whichever first string or starting offensive line that they had to start off the Hall of Fame game, I didn't really like what I saw. They weren't really getting that much protection there. So I know it was the first game and it was just the exhibition game or something like that. So they weren't really that prepared. So hopefully I expect them to come out a lot better than what they did last week against the Denver Broncos in the Hall of Fame game. So I just want to make sure I can keep my eyes on them. I know this is supposed to be a good group on paper, and I know that this is most likely going to be a very good offensive line, but I just want to make sure I have some reassurance that last week was just some rust. Then I'm also going to be watching the Atlanta Falcons halfback. You got Brian Hill, you got Barner there, and you got Quandre Wilson. Now, Brian Hill, out of these three halfbacks, had the best game last week against the Denver Broncos. He was pretty solid. He caught a few passes at the backfield. He also had some pretty nice runs as well. So I think he's really improving his chance of ending up making this Atlanta Falcons roster because he was very, very impressive last week against the Denver Broncos. Then you have the Miami Dolphins offensive line. Now, their offensive line is a big question mark because they got rid of their offensive line coach. I believe it was last week or something like that. They fired the offensive line coach. So anytime that you make an adjustment, getting rid of your offensive line coach in the middle of the off season, especially during training camp is like a very big and critical part. Anytime you get rid of your offensive line and you have another guy step up, it's going to have some kind of impact on your offensive line. We've seen this happen with the Minnesota Vikings last year. Their offensive line coach died last offseason around this time. God bless his soul. And it had a big effect on this Minnesota Vikings offensive line last season. So the Miami Dolphins going to be interested in seeing how their offensive line does in this preseason game since they made that change so late in the offseason. Then the big story of the offseason has been Josh Rosen versus Ryan Fitzpatrick. And from what we've been hearing so far, that Ryan Fitzpatrick is the obvious QB1 and Josh Rosen is basically playing from behind. So I'm expecting to see both of these guys get a legitimate amount of reps this game, a good amount of snaps and opportunities. And I think Josh Rosen really needs to prove himself because I don't really see the point of him really getting. I don't really see the point of the Miami Dolphins trading for Josh Rosen just for him to sit back and ride the pine to Ryan Fitzpatrick this year because Ryan Fitzpatrick is a little bit too old for a young guy like Josh Rosen to be sitting behind the bench. So I really want to see Josh Rosen succeed and win the starting job, and it all starts in this preseason game here. So Josh Rosen really needs to come out and he needs to prove himself in this game. Now some players to watch for the Atlanta Falcons. The quarterback position is going to be really interesting because Matt Schaub was not impressive in the Hall of Fame game last week against the Denver Broncos. He went 4-14. Kurt Benkert, the former Virginia Cavaliers quarterback, is on injury reserve. So now they brought in Matt Sims, who was the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Legends for a couple of weeks. So it's going to be interesting seeing how he does in this preseason game here, knowing that he hasn't really been on the team or on the roster for that long of a time. So it's going to be really interesting seeing if he's able to get his timing down with some of these wide receivers and be able to make some plays. And this backup quarterback spot should be pretty easy for Matt Sims to take if he does what he's supposed to do because Matt Schaub was not really that impressive last week against the Denver Broncos, but the offensive line didn't really help him out at all. And also he had an opportunity late in that game also when Kurt Benkert got injured late in that game. He came in and he didn't really do that much either. So Matt Schaub is a guy whose backup quarterback spot is basically on the line. And now I'm going to be talking about Quandre Ollinson. He's another guy that I'm going to be interested in watching. We saw what the Atlanta Falcons halfbacks did last week against the Denver Broncos. They didn't really have that much success besides the one guy who I touched on earlier. So Quandre Ollinson is another guy who I think is going to have to be able to step up in this game if he wants to improve his chances of making the 53-man roster as well. Wide receivers, Christian Christian Blake and Zacchaeus were pretty good in the Hall of Fame game, especially Zacchaeus. He had some pretty nice catches, some pretty big plays in that game as well. Also Christian Blake. So I'm going to be continuing watching them throughout this game, seeing if they're going to be able to maintain their success. Then you got defensive end John Kaminsky. He had a sack last week in the Hall of Fame game, and he was pretty solid in that game. Jermaine Grace was very, very good in that game last week versus the Denver Broncos. This guy reminds me a lot of Deion Jones. They have a similar playing style, and they're kind of similar in skill set, but obviously Jermaine Grace still needs a lot more of improvement there, but he was pretty solid last week, so I'm going to be interested in seeing how he does in this game this week versus the Miami Dolphins against the offensive line, which isn't really that good. Then cornerback Kendall Sheffield, he had a pretty nice game versus the Denver Broncos as well. So I'm going to be interested in seeing how these guys for the Atlanta Falcons do in this game. Now the players to watch for the Miami Dolphins don't really have a lot of players to watch for the defensive side of the ball other than Christian Wilkins, since that was their first-round pick. Going to be eager to see what he does there at that defensive tackle position. How good is he going to be when it comes to stopping the run, because he's very athletic, very fast, and very quick. Then you got the quarterback position, like I touched on earlier, Ryan Fitzpatrick versus Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen obviously playing from behind in his quarterback competition, so he really needs to come out and solidify himself. And also Josh Rosen, he can end up being in another situation around this time next offseason, because Miami, if they don't feel confident, and because they obviously know that Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't really their quarterback of the future, he's just a temporary replacement. But Josh Rosen, if he doesn't show the Miami Dolphins something that gives them some confidence that he could indeed lead this franchise and be the quarterback of the future, then the Miami Dolphins could end up drafting another quarterback next year when the 2020 NFL draft comes around, and that draft class is freaking loaded with a bunch of talented quarterbacks there. So Josh Rosen really needs to come out. He needs to come out like he's on a mission. He needs to show this Miami Dolphins franchise something and show the head coach of the Miami Dolphins something, because it's not really looking good for him right now. Especially when you're behind Ryan Fitzpatrick there, who's really, really up there in age. Then at the halfback position, it's going to be really interesting monitoring that halfback position. You got Caleb Lodge and Kenyon Draco both going to be trying to see who ends up being that starting halfback for the Miami Dolphins. Kenyon Drake, in my opinion, is obviously the more talented halfback, but Caleb Lodge has pretty much been pretty solid this offseason, and he's also making a run for that starting halfback position as well. Then you got Mark Walton, who got released by the Cincinnati Bengals after a tumultuous offseason, getting arrested and things like that. So I want to see what he does. Myles Gaskin was one of the best halfbacks in all of college football last year. Going to be interesting seeing what he does in this game. Then you got halfback Kenneth Farrell. Kenneth Farrell was very, very good when he was playing for the San Antonio Commanders and the AAF. I believe he was their leading rusher, and he was one of the best halfbacks in that league before it got disbanded and went bankrupt and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what we get out of this halfback position. And this halfback position is going to be very key, because this Miami Dolphins team, I don't expect them to really pass the ball that much. I expect them to be running heavy this offseason, since that's pretty much what they really want to implement. I don't really think we're going to see them airing it out in a lot of games. I think this is a team that pretty much wants to kind of pound the ball, rely on their defense, and control time possession here. So I think it's very important that we see what halfbacks are going to be able to perform. I'm especially looking forward to seeing Myles Gaskins, because Myles Gaskins is really, really underrated. He's undersized, but he has good speed, has good burst as well. And also Kenneth Farrell, he's very solid as well. And then the last player that we have wide receiver Isaiah Ford. Now, Isaiah Ford has been on the Miami Dolphins roster for a few seasons now. I believe he's been on the roster for at least 2 seasons now, and I really want to see him get an opportunity to showcase what he's able to do. He's listed as their second receiver at one of their positions, according to IrelandsFootball.com. Now, he was on their practice squad last year, and he ended up getting moved up somewhere during the season. So I really want to see Isaiah Ford and what he's going to be able to do, and if he's going to be able to make this roster. And this is going to be a good chance to showcase this, because he's going to be in a good situation, because in the preseason, normally the backups get a legitimate amount of playing time. So I really want to see what Isaiah Ford does. I really want to see him make some plays. I think he's a really, really big sleeper. And I think if he ends up having a good preseason, then he can end up having a significant role in his Miami Dolphins passing attack when the regular season rolls around. So this is it for my Atlanta Falcons versus Miami Dolphins Week 1 preseason preview. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comment section down below. Let me know some guys who you guys want to be watching, whether some things that you guys want to be watching. Also, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content. And thanks for watching.